Yeah, so I actually got my first shot at the PSA for EMA back in 2000, and it was on the oceans. And I said in that PSA, the creatures in the ocean have to live with our pollution, our garbage, and our ignorance. And that was in 2000. I mean, I couldn't be more thrilled to be board member of EMA. I'm also board member of Heal the Bay. I'm in the ocean and I'm on with EMA for almost 2 decades. And being here with the EMA Impact Summit is so amazing because it's where we share solutions. And the ocean is our life force. We're so proud to be able to introduce the 70% of the planet, moderated by Monterey Bay Aquarium's Executive Director and Vice Chair of the Aquarium's Board of Trustees, Julie Packard.
Thank you. Well, I'm so excited that we actually have a panel, albeit only 30 minutes, to talk about the biggest deal on planet Earth, the ocean. And of course, 70% is just a little piece of the story because 99% of the living space on the planet is actually in the ocean, as probably many folks here know. So our lives depend on the ocean. We're realizing that more and more, and even though we've always thought the ocean was so big we couldn't possibly have an impact on it, we now know that's not the case. And of course, being involved with founding and leading the Monterey Bay Aquarium over all these years, I've thought a lot about the situation and have really dedicated myself to getting people to understand and to care about and to care for the ocean. And I'm really, really excited and really enthused and energized by all the energy that's happening around this. So we have a fantastic panel here today that kind of ranges from the awareness building piece to the solution space. And so I'd like to invite the panelists up here to join me, starting with Jaden Smith, of course, who needs absolutely no introduction. Hey, Jaden. Thank you so much for all you've done for the EMA Awards. It sounds like you've been involved for a long time, and it's super cool that you have gotten engaged in co-founding an amazing sustainable company, Just Water. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, but I encourage you to go on their website. I mean, they have it dialed in every detail. It's really, really impressive. Fantastic. Next, I'd like to invite Michael Muller up here. Michael is a very accomplished celebrity photographer, as I'm sure all of you know, but more recently he's taken the dive and published an amazing book about sharks with incredible imagery. You've got to check it out. And then also the film that we have going on out in the lobby, which you need to check out as well. VR is a really amazing opportunity to expand the immersion. We're terrestrial beings. Some of us dive, some of us swim, but for the most part, we really don't have a chance to feel what the ocean is really like, unless you go to an aquarium, of course, which is the best thing to do, but I run one, what can I say? Next, would like to invite Mark Gold to join us. Mark headed Heal the Bay for nearly 20 years, which is just an absolutely outstanding environmental organization here in Southern California that's credited with so much progress in our state. And as you know, this state leads the nation and in many ways the world in terms of environmental solutions. And we're keeping that leadership up. He's now at UCLA heading really, really intriguing new project called the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge, and the goal is to make Los Angeles a green leader. You all need to help them do that. I mean, I'm so excited about this goal, and we can do it here in California. It's a big challenge. This is a big city, but finding solutions here would have great implications around the world for all the mega cities beyond. And then last but not least, Andrew Morlet, who's CEO of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Welcome, Andrew. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is an incredible foundation. Founded in 2010, I only became aware of their work just a few years ago, and they are pioneering a whole new idea called the circular economy. And when you think about our lives, especially here in the United States, pretty much everything we consume, it's a one-way ticket from resource extraction to creating the product, to us using the product, to it going to the landfill or into the ocean. He's working to change that paradigm, and really privileged. Thank you for making the journey, and I'm really excited to have you share your ideas. So I'm going to go ahead and settle in here, and we can start our conversation. So I thought we'd maybe start with hearing about the big challenge of, how to get people to care about this place where they spend very little time and they never get to go. And it really begins, I think the best communication begins from the heart. So maybe just starting with you, Jaden, how did you get fired up about the ocean? And in your work, what do you see people responding to?
When I was 11, I started learning about the Pacific Patches, and I watched An Inconvenient Truth, and I got really, 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 really fired up. And I started working with Drew Fitzgerald, co-founder of JUST and kind of my environmental partner, and he would just educate me, and he would just talk to me like I was an adult and like I knew all of this stuff already. It's like, oh, you didn't know that there was like an island of plastic floating around the ocean? Oh, you didn't know that this many CO2, or you didn't know that cars are terrible for the environment. And when I started learning all of these things, I started sharing it with people, but sharing it didn't feel like enough. I really wanted to not be a part of the terrible statistics I was reading about. And then, that's when we started JUST at the age of 11. And I feel like, it didn't go into, Whole Foods until I was 17. So it was a very, very long journey, and it kind of taught me that you can make change, and sometimes it might take long, but you can really do it. And I feel like people really respond to events like this and people just taking action, but that's how I got involved in learning about the environment. And ever since then, that's when it really took off for me, and that's where my passion really sparked, back when it's all about education. So for me, I want to continue to educate people, because that's the only way that I became aware of all of these issues.
That's great. Well, everyone appreciates your work. I mean, and as we heard earlier, the young people are the ones that are going to fire up and get involved in cleaning up the mess that my generation has left for you all. Sorry about that. So, Michael, what about you? Tell us about your journey into the ocean, and I understand you have a video to share with us as well. So.
It's similar to Jaden. I actually, when I was 10, 11 years old, I grew up in Saudi Arabia for 4 years. So I started diving in the Persian Gulf, which was like untouched reefs, and fell in love with the ocean, which continued on when I got back to the United States. And I am a true believer in people protect what they love. And how you treat your planet is sort of how we treat ourselves, and I have a big passion for the ocean, and it grows by going out there and connecting with it and getting, diving and being in the ocean a lot. But yes, I have a little video clip. I for the last 10 years, have been trying to change people's perceptions, specifically about sharks. Like Jaden, I didn't know till 12 years ago I went on a trip, was really naive. We didn't know we were killing 100 million sharks every year. Didn't know there was a piece of plastic the size of Texas, floating out between California and Hawaii. Half the Great Barrier Reef is gone. And I sort of made it a goal to, I for a living, I take images and sell, movies or shoes or what have you. And I said, I'm going to do what I can to try to help this particular animal. It's very hard, not hard, but it was challenging using a photograph. But when VR came along, I was like, now this is something, because I can take you with me on this journey. So we brought, I think outside in the lobby, there's some headsets for you to experience. But yeah, there's a little clip if you want to run it.
Okay, let's roll. Wow, that's beautiful, beautiful images. On the topic of white sharks, they're near and dear to our hearts at Monterey Bay Aquarium, and as hopefully you all know, California passed a bill, which we co-sponsored a few years ago, to ban the sale and possession of shark fins in California because we're the biggest market outside of Asia. So, it's just an example of how we can fire up and enact change, but also show leadership in our state to the rest of the world. And that 100 million sharks, it's tragic. There's no reason for it. And also, we're learning more and more about these sharks. We've been sponsoring some work in Monterey to understand our shark population off California. And it turns out it's a special, unique population that just goes up and down our coast. You have them off Santa Monica, and we're quite familiar with them, I'm sure. But they need protection as well. It's a pretty small population and quite fascinating to learn more about it. So thanks for sharing that. So let's hear about your journey and what we're going to do here in the city of Los Angeles to change the world. I'm fired up.
Well, just to follow up, when I was at Gila Bay, we also partnered with you guys on that bill, which was authored by Mark Fong and Jared Huffman, which was game-changing. I was even able to arm twist my brother, who's a pretty well-known food critic, Jonathan Gold, to write a pretty powerful piece in the Times called The Bitter Taste of Extinction that I think was really important to come out at that time. I grew up along Santa Monica Bay, and so for me, just spent my whole childhood there and really have spent my whole life. I've gone nowhere. And my kids, the same sort of thing, is that so they grew up swimming and surfing in Santa Monica Bay, and we all dive. And so the ocean has been a huge part of my life really since I was a little kid. And to be part of something and part of a community that you can point to, not a lot of really big success stories to point to and say this was an example where locals really made a difference in looking at the water quality and ecosystem health of Santa Monica Bay is just light years better than where it was back in the mid-'80s when Gila Bay started. And so it does show you at the local level, and then at the state level with that sort of bill, you can really make a big difference. It's much tougher when you scale up, obviously, with global and national. And so what we're doing, which is really innovative at UCLA, is that we've done the Sustainable LA Grand Challenge. We're in the midst of it. We have 45 different research projects, 75 different faculty working on these research projects. And we decided to really make a difference through our research in interdisciplinary fashion in our own backyard here in LA. No one ever thinks of LA as being the most sustainable megacity in the country, or let alone the world, and it's not. And so there's a lot of challenges that we're seeing, are the same sort of challenges we're seeing all over the world with increased urbanization. And so the thought is if we can get to 100% renewable energy, 100% local water, and enhanced ecosystem health, and do it working with local government, state government, and federal government, and partners in business and other academic institutions and NGOs, that it would be a great example. And so that's really what it's all about from the standpoint of ocean protection. I harken back to the beginning of my career where you looked at the sewage treatment plants, Hyperion treatment plant on the coast here in Santa Monica Bay, and it was so polluted it caused a dead zone in the middle of the bay. Now we look at Hyperion treatment plant and go, with all the discharge of 250 million gallons a day, and go, what a waste of water. What can we do to actually make sure we capture that water and have it to the point where it's not polluting, but it actually helps on ocean acidification by keeping the nitrogen out of the receiving waters, and then actually enhance our own local water supply so that we're not impairing river systems and deltas, hundreds of miles away. So that's the sort of stuff that we're really trying to get done at UCLA.
That's great. Well, hopefully everyone I hope many of you in the audience will, help move this forward vision by spreading the word. It's super exciting.
Thank you.
So, Andrew, you're working at a global level on a very important high-level concept that would really be a great solution to the whole situation we're in, which is about reframing and rethinking our consumption of goods, where they begin and where they end. So tell us a little bit about your work, and also how it relates to the ocean, because you're obviously not just working on the ocean environment, you're working on things that will improve the overall environment. But tell us about the work in the Ocean Connection.
Yeah, so the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is not the MacArthur Foundation in the US, Ellen MacArthur was an international yachtswoman. She held the single-handed round-the-world time record. She's the most decorated single-handed sailor in British history, youngest dame in British history, Legion d'Honneur in France. We have a whole lot of people who sail. We're very interested in the ocean, but that's actually not what we're on about. And I'm going to talk a little bit about plastics, but we got into plastics in an interesting way. We're actually on about regenerative economics. So, as Julie said, I think when you think about the economy, I don't know what you think of, but it's made of three things really. It's about energy, it's about materials, and it's about information. And money is a form of information. But we've talked a lot about energy in the last 2 days, and great conversations. The material part of the economy is grossly underestimated and not very well understood. The fact that we burn through everything in a linear way, we take it out of the ground, we turn it into products that we keep for increasingly shorter periods of time, and then we landfill or incinerate it, means that we lose an extraordinary amount of energy through that process, and we're burning through finite materials, and we've got a lot of negative externalities. And plastics was a topic that we got into in 2014 because we were trying to understand global material flows. And we said, let's pick a topic that everybody understands and everybody's familiar with, and it's everywhere. So we said plastics. And at that stage, I started going to all these meetings, and we started bumping into people who are looking at the issue of plastics pollution in the ocean. And I was meeting with the world's most informed scientists and companies that were looking at this, and they were talking about oceans plastics, and the evidence was starting to emerge that it was a bit of a problem, a big problem, but we had no science. There were in 2014, there was not a scientific publication or any real understanding of the volumes of plastics that were leaking into the ocean. So we said, let's have a look at this and try to understand it, and we dived in. And I thought we would find, databases, scientific papers, academic work that was done that really quantified the global stocks and flows of plastics, because it's so ubiquitous and so common, you'd think somebody would know something about it. Turns out we didn't, and we had to go and build these databases, and we had to actually work out the volumes. There's roughly 300 million tons of plastics produced every year. Incredibly complicated. Everything from, cars to car bumpers, car parts to packaging to clothing. 60% of clothing is made of plastics. Incredibly complex, and we said we couldn't really imagine how you would actually come at this problem, so we picked plastics packaging and we got in deep. 78 million tons produced annually, and I've got a couple of slides to show, if you could bring them up. This is a what's called a Sankey diagram. So 78 million tons of plastics every year goes into the system. If you follow the loop around the top, only 2% of it actually goes back in. We only collect 14% of plastics packaging globally for recycling today after 40 years of effort. 40 years ago in California, the recycling logo was invented. But 40 years later, with all that effort, we only collect 14%. Only 2% goes back into the system and is used as packaging again. Look on the right-hand side here, 40% is landfilled, 14% is incinerated, but 32% of it leaks into the ocean every year. So what this means is, if you run it forward, means that by 2050, we're going to have more plastics in the ocean by weight than fish, which is pretty staggering. It accumulates, never goes away. The stuff you see floating around the top is the tip of the iceberg. The rest of it goes to fragments, sinks to the bottom. There's an enormous amount of plastics in the ocean. So we said we had to actually we looked at the problem. We said, so who's working on this and what's the answer? And everybody says it's beach cleanups and haven't got a clue. So we went away and did a little bit of math, and we said if you add up all the beach cleanups on the planet and look at the best ones and you say how much of this is it going to fix, it's less than 0.5% of what goes into the ocean every year. So we needed a different approach, and we said we've got to move right upstream and we've got to change the global system. We have to find a better approach because plastics are an essential part of the economy. We can't have a modern economy without it. We need to find a way of actually making it work. So that's the agenda that we took on, and we moved it right back upstream, and we started to work with companies to look at how we could redesign plastics packaging in a way that it never becomes waste and it never gets into the ocean in the first place. And we did innovation work. We worked with these people on the right-hand side. You can see there. Carmen Uvella's the Minister for Environment in Europe. We worked on the European plastics packaging. We said if we could get 10% of the global brands to get behind this idea, we could start to tip the system. We could actually converge the plastics packaging in a way to make it work. It's like saying, let's get the internet protocol for plastics that sets the baseline economics, and above that we could innovate, and we had to get 10% of the companies. We now have 13% of the global volume working on this agenda upstream, and that says that these companies are only going to put on the market by 2025 100% recyclable plastics or the recyclable, biodegradable or reusable. Today, these companies, most of them put only about 5% of what they put on the market as recyclable. It's remarkable. So this is a massive shift, and this is what we think is needed to actually start to move the system.
Well, and of course, Jaden, you are, involved in this revolution. So congratulations for that. Working on new solutions to all of our packaging. I wanted to interject. We've been talking about plastics, and it's been fascinating to me how this topic has just really captured the American public kind of as a gateway to thinking about ocean conservation. And, if you talk to scientists, they would say, well, in terms of the future of the ocean, the plastic situation is not the most important thing. The biggest threat is global climate change. Thank you very much for everyone working on that. And overfishing, which is a massive immediate problem that we know how to fix. And a lot of great work is going on here in the U.S., a lot of it driven by Monterey Bay Aquarium and our Seafood Watch program. Hopefully a lot of you are familiar with that. The U.S., we consume 90%, we import, we're the third biggest importer of seafood in the world, and we import 90% of the seafood we eat. So everything that you see in a restaurant, the vast majority is imported, and a lot of it's from very unsustainable sources that are not managed, and also that have human rights issues, slave labor, child labor involved in their whole enterprise. So just as Jaden's thinking about the whole picture, sustainability isn't just about sustainability of the environment, it's about sustainability of communities and people, and that's why we need to really broaden our definition. But I'm really excited about the momentum around the sustainable seafood movement, because 85% of the big retailers and the big food service companies here in the U.S. have made commitments to get their act together over time. So that's a piece of happy news there, as we work on these other issues. But maybe for any of you to respond, talk a little bit about how you see business being part of the solution. And a lot of environmental groups, there's a role for the protests and the lawsuits against business, but on the other hand, business drives the global economy, and much of what happens in our government and our democracy, sad but true, today more than ever. And so talk about the role of business and where you see opportunity for change.
I think business is very important to introduce into the conversation, because if we cannot turn these environmental futures into viable businesses, then the Cokes and the Pepsis and the big corporations will never jump on board until they can see, oh, this is an actual business, and this can actually make money, and there's a market for this, and people are warming up to this, and people prefer this than what we've been previously doing, because we have to change the ethos of humanity to want a better world. And another thing that I think is when it comes to recycling, we need to change people's minds and educate them more about the limitless capabilities of recycling. And we haven't really talked about it a lot for the whole summit, but this stage that we're standing on is made out of 10,000 Just Water bottles.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, and I feel like people don't, it's a different form of recycling. It's a company called Rewall, and they take all types of bottles and they turn it into this kind of plywood material. And the amount of things that can be created out of that, I feel like we could start a new industry where we're recycling these single-use bottles, Coke bottles, Just Water, all different types of bottles, and turning them into something like this, where you turn into a stage, plywood, or you turn into furniture, a couch, a chair, something that's not a single use, something that doesn't get thrown away after one time of somebody using it. I feel like that's something that people don't really think about.
So I'm glad to hear, obviously, about these sorts of innovations, but what troubles me is the big numbers, which have been talked about in this group as well as in previous discussion. If we're talking about 8 million metric tons plus per year of plastics going into the ocean, and we're talking about a recovery rate of plastic packaging of 2% or something that you just provided, and even with the EU policy that just passed, which congratulations on getting that done. It is very innovative because it really is a circular economy-based policy that just passed in January in the EU. Without the business as well as government providing the infrastructure to really ensure that we're actually getting much higher recovery rates on the plastic packaging and plastic manufacturing, we're not going to solve the problem. And that's what concerns me, is that even California, which has one of the most mature, best bottle redemption fee program, can redemption fee programs in the world, success is 70 to 80%, right? And so that means 20% is not being captured at all, even when we're paying people a nickel to a dime to give it back, right? And so there's something that's broken in the system that we need to fix, and how business and how government are going to step up and take that to the next level. And obviously making recycling a heck of a lot easier is a big part of it, and that's obviously what this group is pushing for in a big way, is hugely important. But that step has not occurred yet. We'll see the EU experiment. I think it really is an experiment in how well it's going to work. They do capture a little bit of funding with extended producer responsibility, with a small portion of every purchase price being used to run the program. Trying to get that done in California and the United States, as you know, Julie, has been a loser for the last 20 years. But that's what needs to occur.
I think it's really interesting. If you look at it as a system, you've got the companies on the one hand, the regulators, policymakers on the other, and the public is the third leg. And that's what's important to this group. We've got to be able to tell stories to people to help them to understand that we've got to move upstream, radically move upstream. But we can't do this without scaled industrial solutions. The innovation has to come from industry, and it has to come from the multinational global companies that are putting the volumes on the market. Unilever has 2 billion customers per day. We're focused on these companies because if we can shift them, we can shift billions of products that go onto the market. If we try to do it regulatory, this is a global issue. It's a global ocean. We've got one ocean, and products being designed in Cincinnati being sold in New Delhi or Philippines with no understanding of what the collection scheme is at the other end. We've got to think of it as a global challenge, and we've got to approach it at scale and progressively ramp up the agenda every 6 months for the next 10 years to get this done. It can't be solved through regulation alone, because you got 190 countries, right, and thousands of states and thousands of more municipalities. To harmonise them is impossible. Right. So it's got to be led by industry, and we've got to drive it from the public side to make sure that these companies deliver against the promises they're making.
I would say that's exactly what's happening in the sustainable seafood movement. The consumer drive that the U.S. market has put forward, businesses have responded, and now we're asking them to come with us to ask governments, international governments, to make better fishing laws and essentially lock in they've decided this is good for business. The fishing populations are being depleted. They realize that needs to change, and business is asking government. Well, so we're about out of time here, and I just want to ask a last question to everyone. What's the one message, 30 seconds, the one thing that you'd ask this audience to do that you think can really have an impact? We have a lot of people of influence, great storytellers, people that know how to reach a lot of folks. What's your message, your parting thought?
I think that spreading awareness is really, really important, because without an inconvenient truth, I don't think that I would have been aware of all these problems and things that are going on. And I feel like people don't openly talk about it enough. I didn't know that 100 million sharks are being killed every year. I didn't know about these. I've never seen the recycling the way that you showed it in that, just there. And I feel like we just need to continue to spread the message, because there's so many terrible things happening in the world, and there's a lot of good things happening in the world too, but the terrible is really overpowering the good right now. So we really need to educate people and get everybody involved, is what I would say.
For me, I try to take an approach to what's in my personal space. Instead, I know that these companies and that scale, but what I can do in my life and in my family's life, which is using glass bottles, trying not to, anytime they offer me a bag, these little choices that I make have a big impact on these companies, because we are the buyers and how we live our life. We talked backstage about this young woman up in Northern California who has gotten dealt in all these companies to stop using straws. This one girl has had this huge impact. And so I try to, empower that with my daughters, because it spreads to the sellers. So, it's what you do has a big impact. That's my message and takeaway.
Great.
And I would just say, get involved, take action. You see what happens on environmental issues if no action is taken. And action, it really whatever fits best for you. Your decision could be made with the purchases you make each and every day. It could be at the voting booth. It could be on where you donate your resources, or you could roll up your sleeves and really make a big difference on everything from habitat restoration to getting engaged in so many different ways. And so the big thing is, don't be passive about it. Don't judge. Just get active and really try to make a difference. And there's enough success stories out there and enough models out there that you'll really make a big impact. And that's really what has to occur.
I thought Van set it up yesterday really nicely. We're in the fourth quarter, and we actually need to up our game. I mean, we really need to reset the ambition level, and we need to tell stories that are inspiring and engage people and show that this is eminently solvable. It's an innovation opportunity for us to actually rethink how we deliver services and products and actually shift from linear to a more metabolic, regenerative economy, and it's about inspiring a generation to get this and tooling them to help them to get this done. And it needs to be an inspiring story, I think.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I guess my parting thought would be just to ask all of you and your friends and colleagues to help us get better at what we do, better at storytelling and better at reaching the public. In the end, we have to make an emotional connection, because that's what gets people to, decide to get out of their chairs and do something, whatever it may be. So bring it on. We all have our own tools. I'm involved with an aquarium. Animals are inspiring. We can only reach so many people at our place. You all have your tools, and share what works and help us all get better. And I think we'll be able to get there. So, join me in thanking these fabulous panelists for their work.